right, thank you very much. My name is Mikko Loikkanen from Alfa Mobility. So I'm Finnish-based, Finn, and I think talking about relocation, international moving. Now, obviously, the topic today is around the US, but a lot of what I'm talking today and will present is applicable anywhere in the world, literally, as a service that we provide, and also if you're hiring people from abroad and bringing them into Finland as well. And I think if you've jumped through all the hoops that the previous presenters have talked about, I think it makes sense from an employee perspective to also, consider the hoops you have to jump through when it comes to relocating, and how that also affects the experience of going abroad into a new country or bringing in people into Finland who come from a different nationality, for example. And it's a lot about the employee experience, obviously. Now, if you're a founder and the sole, employee of that company and you're relocating, then it's, one experience. But if you're hiring people or sending them on assignment, you do have to take certain things into consideration from that experience. And also if they have a partner, children, etc., moving with them on how to make that transition as smooth as possible, and some of the pitfalls that can happen, mostly in being compliant and perhaps how much of the time spent settling in, getting registered, etc., can take away from not working, not being productive in the role that you're supposed to be doing. And some of the questions you can ask is, how are you doing it today? Or have you ever done it before? So, relocating abroad, moving abroad personally or with employees. How much do you plan to do it in the future? And what does that look like? Do you have a policy in place? What's the cost involved? Have you taken any of these considerations into play? And if it's more of a question, I guess, on who does it in the company. If there are people doing it, are you the, CEO probably doesn't do this, CIO probably doesn't do this, COO probably doesn't do this. Logistics people definitely shouldn't be doing this, but if they are, perhaps it's perhaps in the wrong place at that time. So, how much time does HR spend in matters related to relocating? On a tactical level, where it probably should be more on a strategic level, and where a good partner would come into play and help you in that experience overall. And if I had €1 for every time somebody says, oh, I wish I knew this service was available when I moved, or when we hired our first employee, or when we sent people abroad, I would have many euros. So it's not something that companies and people are generally aware of, that a service like this is available, and the benefits that it brings. And I'll show you a little bit in the future slides on what it is specifically. A little bit about Alfa as a company. So we're a Nordic company. We've been around 30 years in the Nordics, 20 years in Finland. In Finland, we're about 20 people. And we assist hundreds of assignees every year for hundreds of companies as well. And the important part is we have a lot of substance expertise, ISO certified, etc. So when it comes to information security, everything is on a very high level. And the benefits that we bring as a relocation or mobility provider is, if you're going into one country, there's, as we've seen, things that you need to take into considerations. But if you're sending people into numerous countries, those will be different country by country, and you'll have different suppliers that you need to either manage or then go to a single point of contact to arrange these for you. And typically we'd say we're hand-holding for the assignee, the person relocating, and for the HR. And specifically, if you don't have your own HR, then it does make sense to have a partner that can provide you guidance through timelines, expected costs, general advice on how to make the whole process, as said, as smooth as possible. And what it entails in practice is, with a timeline, is services that allow that employee to settle into that new location with their partner, children, or by themselves. Some of the services that we would classify as necessities, such as immigration, as was presented previously, and as well having a bank account, being locally registered, being able to receive that salary, have a place to live, kind of makes sense. And those accompanying family members will change the scenario a little bit. So schools come into play, daycare, how is that linked, for example, into where you live? Not as easy as to say, where do you work? How do you commute? What's a good place to live? But how does that affect school and daycare availability? Do you do private? Do you do public? International schools, etc. So considerations around that. Obviously, if you arrive into the new country, you want to consider where do you stay, where you're going to live temporarily or permanently. Do you rent? Do you buy? What's a good neighborhood, etc. These type of considerations. So typically we would arrange temporary accommodation for the first 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, so you get accustomed to the neighborhoods and areas, and then look into renting after that. Comes into lease negotiations, etc. And yeah, a lot of it is also how the accompanying spouse settles in. What activities do they seek employment as well, or do they want social interactions, and how does that process work and look from the duration of the assignment, for example. And as we see for families coming into Finland, the number one reasons why people leave is because of the lack of integration. So that spouse doesn't feel like it's a place where they want to be, live, and then that job necessarily doesn't keep them in the country. So making sure that everyone that goes on that assignment has the best opportunities and is settled in is definitely the best way to make the best out of that process overall. And what those services specifically mean, now again, some of it is good to have and others are definitely recommended. And what we see is obviously starting from even the pre-hire call, welcome call. So what we do for employers as well is we pre-screen, give a, let's say, neutral perspective on what life in that new country might be, and do an assessment if it's practical or if this person will be a good fit for that assignment and country and understanding of the local situations. Area orientations to get a better understanding of where you're going to. If you've never been in the country, never been in the state or the city, can make sense to get a feel, get an understanding of where you're going to. I'll mention a little bit more about the moving services. So again, as I said, logistics departments in companies or logistics people generally will not be the best people to manage when it comes to household goods, your personal property. Now, obviously, if you're moving with just suitcases, that's fine. That's a good decision. But in many cases, you do have items of sentimental value or, for your children, etc., that you want to bring along because it doesn't make sense to buy new items at the other end. And if you don't move them, what are you going to do with them in the origin country? Do you store them, etc.? So some considerations around that. I said temporary accommodations, settling in, really important just to make sure that you get on track in the destination as quickly as possible and you don't lose time trying to figure it out for yourselves. So that part is typically that physical hand-holding of making sure that everything is aligned as smoothly as possible. And that's where the time saving typically pays for all the services altogether, so you don't lose that time trying to figure it out. HR saves time when they don't have to answer all the questions. Where's the dentist? Where's the doctor? What about pets? These type of things. We can support answering those questions on your behalf. Home finding, school search, spouse support, as said. A nice overall package that just makes the whole process that much easier. And then from a company perspective as well, you do want to think that what's the cost involved and how do we make sure that all the employees have the same services, or what service do we exclude, and that where we jump in helps to budget that, what that process looks like from a timeline perspective and a cost perspective, and just overall helps in general planning, for example, for future projects. Now, household goods, this is the bread and butter basically of what we do, but yeah, the physical movement of your personal items, so furniture, books, clothing, these type of things that you can't carry yourself, but you do want to bring with you into the destination country. Going into the US, for example, you're looking at a timeline of 6 to 8 weeks on the East Coast and 10 to 12 weeks for the West Coast. And obviously there's different options from a transporting perspective. You can do air freight as well for smaller shipments. As said here earlier as well, that can't include things like liquids, cosmetics, batteries, etc. So that's mostly for your critical items that you don't want to carry yourself, but you do want to bring along. Sea freight, 20-foot, 40-foot containers, so you can bring your full household, vehicles, these type of things as well. And yeah, how that looks as a service compared to, you know, having friends come over and helping out. We provide a turnkey service where we do all the packing, loading, materials, customs clearances. So basically we show up on the agreed date, and then once the goods arrive into the US, customs cleared, delivered to your residence and set up, and making that process just so much easier overall. Delays obviously can be and are quite regular. We talked about kind of risk analysis. So customs X-ray examinations, for example, in the US are quite regular when it comes to household goods, because on a risk level it's quite high, because it can mean and be anything and everything that, you know, people have compared to, say, commercial shipments. But yeah, overall, we do about 1,000 shipments to the US and back between the Nordic countries every year. So we do have quite a bit of experience on that in general. And then when it comes to, you know, things that can go well and things that can go bad, and what's the difference? A lot of it comes to that employee experience or your personal experience of how the process goes. Now, I said, if the whole assignment is a failure, that's a lot of money wasted overall. So the risk mitigation around that just helps quite a bit. The productivity aspect, also very important. So, you know, is that person productive from day one or not? And who's picking up the pieces if they aren't, and what happens after that? Performance, retention, you know, I said, also very important around that, and not being consumed by ad hoc problem solving. On the other hand, if it goes well, people are productive, people are happy, the assignment is a success, you get your return on investment through that. You have a partner that provides you guidance for the next one. We can help with the budgets, help with the policies, and just make sure that you have a strong foundation for, you know, expansion and growth for your business, either in the US or other countries, or even here in Finland overall. And taking a step even further from that is obviously you might want to be coming back at some point, or people leave. A second consideration, and that's where things can go wrong just as well. People consider, you know, if you've been abroad for a few years or 5 years or 10 years, coming back, it'll be easy. That's where we left. The reality generally hits quite hard and is not exactly the same. So overall, it's good to consider alternatives or options on services to help mitigate those risks and pitfalls. And worst case, you know, or to avoid loss of that talent from the business, because I've heard it. For example, if you're the, you know, vice president of South America and you come back and then you become the manager of Pirkkala region, it's not exactly the same from a career perspective. And then people start to look elsewhere for new opportunities, and typically international assignments are an investment by the company to develop the people. So it would be a shame to lose them once they come back and you've kind of not gained the return on your investment there. So a lot of what we do is people business, delivered by people, for people. There's technology nowadays that does help, but at the end of the day, we see that personal aspect, that physical hand-holding is really what companies come to us for, to make sure the assignee experience is as good as possible. And yeah, I think they see the benefits of it, and it helps them grow, either companies in Finland or when they send them on assignment internationally. It's definitely a good service to look into, and yeah, if not specifically for the US, or you don't have a massive company, lots of people going on, or it's not something relevant for today, but the topic resonates, yeah, feel free to connect and grab me by the arm here after the presentation. I'll be more than happy to discuss in more detail.